Has someone ever obsessed over you, idolized you, made you feel like the most perfect person on earth? Remember that rush of being worshipped. For narcissists, lose when a narcissist realizes what they lost you, why and how they behave. The agony of losing your admirer. Has someone ever obsessed over you, idolized you, made you feel like the most perfect person on earth? Remember that rush of being worshipped. For narcissists, losing that glorious supply evokes sheer agony and panic unlike anything else. Suddenly, the very person reflecting back their false godlike image disappears. Imagine that single fan keeping your imposter syndrome at bay vanishing overnight. Just picturing their crestfallen face as you walk away can briefly pierce even the most grandiose ego. In those moments, naked insecurity seeps out from behind the usual smug masks. A rare crack opens in their brash confidence to reveal the helpless terror within. For once, their perfectly curated world teeters out of their domineering control in a way no plotting or scheming can rapidly fix. Raw, emotional withdrawal. In the weeks after you depart, an eerie emotional void gnaws at their psyche. Like smokers desperate without nicotine, losing their favorite admirer and reliable ego-stroke supply elicits a uniquely devastating psychic blow. The comfort, loyalty, and nurturing you provided represented a steady current of light no other superficial, transactional connections replicate. Their highest high was that godlike feeling from your doting acts of service. Without worshippers like you feeding them regularly, their pedestal crumbles. Imagine losing oxygen perpetually pumping up your self-importance. Your relief valve processing toxic shame, and anxiety gets abruptly severed. Painful withdrawal sets in. Any confidence temples or superiority thrones get suddenly yanked out from under them. Their houses of cards collapse. Rarely has their grandiose ego taken such a direct hit. Secretly, their greatest pride was capturing a partner so empowered. Your wise soul saw something in them no one else expends such effort to nurture, and they carelessly squandered it. What a brutal emotional punch. Descending into narcissistic rage. In response to this panic-inducing supply scarcity, most narcissistic types first rage, theatrically. How dare you abandon me now? They hurriedly scramble to charm potential replacements to ease their intense distress. Without your comforting warm glow dulling their emotional desolation, reality rudely intrudes. They hate facing themselves or peering honestly at the relational wreckage their disorder created. Some descend into reckless drug binges or alcoholism to numb their inner chaos. Others spiral into uncharacteristic depressive episodes, leaving them feeling temporarily like whimpering, powerless child versions of themselves, unfamiliar and scary territory. Their go-to coping mechanism of spinning shame into grandiosity short circuits. They momentarily confront the fraudulence of their perfected personas. You are the soul-steady cheerleader perpetuating their beloved narratives of superiority against the ugliness they hid. They must villainize you to cope. To weather this brutal storm, they instinctively villainize you more aggressively to cope. In their revised folklore, they selflessly tried their very best while you cruelly sabotaged a perfect union out of pure coldness or instability. This distorted mental gymnastics crucially protects against confronting their disorder's true ugliness. Their psyche desperately constructs altered memories and qualities of your personality. Their emotional survival relies on obsessing over your defects. This helps them rationalize away those periodic inconvenient pangs of remorse pinging under their bruised egos. Maybe you seem too perfect, making them feel inadequate by comparison. Too confident, threatening their shaky self-assurance. Too principled, daring to abandon them first. Or too caring, holding them to human decency standards their malicious inner critics cannot stomach. Whatever your flaw, exaggerating it shields them temporarily from self-loathing they redirected your way for years. If blaming you is the problem, they get to bypass closely examining their own humanity failures. The mask slips, secret regret exposed. But a deeply buried part still knows the truth. When liquor loosens lips or despair dominates, heartbreaking admissions accidentally surface. She was the only one who ever loved me unconditionally, and I wrecked it. I took his kindness totally for granted. I never felt worthy of her soul. In their rawest moments, behind their larger-than-life bravado, the enormity of irreplaceable loss sets in. You represented a cherished future of comfort cruelly destroyed by their own hands. Appreciating loving partners in real time rarely happens before it's too late, thanks to their emotional blindness. Your warmth and steadfast care offered continuity. No short-term, superficial relationships replicate post-discard. You saw their latent humanity when no one else bothered, and they carelessly squandered it all. What brutal remorse. Their ego rapidly overrules remorseful dissent. But real redemption requires hungry souls. Narcissistic types reflexively gorge on pity parties that quickly reinforce their victim status and specialness. Wallowing in suffering sustains melodramatic supply levels, soaking the parched egos you abandoned. Crocodile tears get weaponized to paint themselves as the wounded martyr now. Any flicker of mutuality relies on your cooperation, signaling they still got to you with a performance. So accountability has narrow footing to take root without outside intervention. Their false self compulsively wins this war. Make no mistake, brutal self-honesty about this disorder's tragic odd sequel of ghostly, restless misery could inspire breakthroughs if paired with humility. The sheer isolation and sense of insignificance absolutely decimates their psychic shelter, if not constantly numbed by new sources of supply, false accomplishments, and pretenses. Yet, the risk of temporarily exposing authentic vulnerability sans mask still sabotages everything for this group. Their false self will compulsively triumph over its obstacle course to cover up fragile spots. Momentary cracks inviting humanity quickly get painted over with 7 more layers of thicker protective coat. Their addiction can rarely withstand a vacuum. If you've ever locked eyes with an addict at rock bottom, you know that look, longing for relief yet craving their drug of choice exponentially more. Loneliness signals to an addict only that more consumed doses might fill the hole temporarily. Yet no amount satiates the spiritual starvation they feel but cannot name from beneath piles of clutter. Acute narcissistic folks similarly dread the vacuum you leave behind, but not for grief's growth teachings. Instead, your absence aggressively confronts them with the scariest void of all. Rather than peek behind their disorder's shield at instigation for positive change, most instinctively scramble to replace missing supply as soon as possible. Reactivation of childhood shame. Imagine rewinding back to when these folks were helpless, voiceless children, at the mercy of unpredictable caregivers. Fears of abandonment notoriously dog most human beings into maturity, but get embedded into neural pathways awaiting re-trigger. Narcissists commonly link destabilizing rejection now with the all-consuming engulfment of undeserved shame way back when. Suddenly getting discarded as worthless, stupid, or unlovable by trusted protectors long ago replays, when you demonstrate their current behavior still repels secure bonds. Blindsiding flashbacks of powerlessness petrify victims, despite accumulated defenses shielding wounded, stunted inner children still concealed underneath uniform layers of arrogance. Will they ever rip off the mask? The possibility of redemptive reforms always exists where humility digs in roots, and extreme suffering can spark initial stages of surrendering mask ties for some. If finally awakening to the barren landscape of alienation, their disorder's scorched earth guaranteed over decades extending into the future alone. Genuine remorse and accountability have slightly better chances should professional help stabilize progress. Those willing to courageously spill their shadow contents before light's glare set authentic healing in motion from inside out. Concrete daily acts of make amends replace temporary intoxication off fumes of dramatic intentions lacking follow-through. With meticulous care, they nurture the long-choked garden of empathy. They focus on emotional repair to past intimate partners harmed by their actions, to earn back basic human rights to connection. From here, perhaps reconciling their fragmented self into wholeness could commence, but without extensive reprogramming of mental thought patterns. Most knee-jerk reactions easily override sprouting self-examination, closure anchoring your worth. Regardless the emotional limitations of partners lacking conscience or empathy, please acknowledge strengths gleaming ever brighter now that their fog has passed. Your sensitivity cultivated blooms even their toxicity failed to thoroughly trample. Instead, new wisdom and insights beckon thanks to painful contrast, teaching what real love cannot thrive without. May you fully embrace your worthiness, anchoring all you still plan to be and become. No one person's blindness or dysfunction deserves the power to define our brilliance without permission. Surround yourself solely with reflections finally affirming the beautiful being you keep. The Narcissist's Plight. Now, on the flip side, for narcissistic types condemned to wander the lonely labyrinth their disorder constructed brick by brick, only radical confrontation with truths buried for decades stands a sliver of a chance. All addicts ultimately know down deep actions betraying their own values, and humanity cannot grant enduring relief or meaning. Yet fear paralyses their first steps towards surrender. Without professional excavation of bedrock beliefs manifesting their malignant false self's very identity, they stay trapped by sheer inertia. The cost of temporarily risking their ego's total implosion deter all but the most courageous from peeking behind the curtain veiling enormous suppressed grief over scarring developmental wounds heartbreakingly still raw in adulthood. How many coats of paint need masking before no one recognizes you anymore? Slivers of hope for accountability. If meteor strike level crises blast away superficial layers self-important defense is counted on, some emerging therapies provoke emotional rock bottom reckonings with reality. For non-personality disordered folks, similar destabilizing defeats often sparks authentic growth by recalibrating priorities. But for certified malignant narcissists, intentionally destroying the ego's precious trophies alone rarely convinces them to forgo the pleasure palace entirely. Not without extensive customized reprogramming of mental maps resisting self-examination. The house's very foundation needs gutting down to studs revealing decades of ugly buckling. Only then can they start rebuilding integrity, where dishonesty foundations formerly focused solely on image protection. If fully grasping the magnitude of hearts broken in their wake, could genuine remorse fertilize the dry dirt where empathy never took hold? Some FOD cracking instigates a long overdue crisis of conscience. Sharp discomfort spurs questioning previous assumptions of their superiority and others' disposability. Finally, recognizing the humanity in people callously used for supplies shakes them profoundly. Is redemption possible when distorted perspectives correct towards reality? The dark night of the soul. Beyond exhaustion, nothing left but radical collapse of everything we know as familiar invites this utter void. Then unexpectedly suffering strips away scaffolding so light, finally filters into crevasses once deeply obscured. A choice emerges. Do we re-erect increasingly transparent walls screening vulnerability again? Or tentatively step forward unfettered by chained false identities into the naked night longing for rebirth? Either to stubbornly cross arms warding off introspective wounds now laid bare held up to the glare, or curl into a ball welcoming cascades of tears rinsing away the barnacle shells hiding sheer beginner's mind openness we secretly yearn for. Each addict comes to terms with their soul's expiration date ticking down different. Will you sink back into the comfort of old habits like quicksand, or courageously rehab moral muscles long atrophied from underuse? Consider carefully. What felt like rock-solid ground revealed itself as thinning ice all along. Meanwhile, the mysterious cosmic heartbeat calls you home back into its embrace, where miracles unfold from inside out the womb, welcoming every fragmented piece of your splintered self, no matter how broken. But the walls must completely dissolve first, including excuses fortifying fear-based isolation. Are you finally prepared to heal instead of rationalize? When a narcissist realizes what they lost you, why and how they behave. The agony of losing your admirer. Has someone ever obsessed over you, idolized you, made you feel like the most perfect person on earth? Remember that rush of being worshipped. For narcissists, losing that glorious supply evokes sheer agony and panic unlike anything else. Suddenly, the very person reflecting back their false godlike image disappears. Imagine that single fan keeping your imposter syndrome at bay vanishing overnight. Just picturing their crestfallen face as you walk away can briefly pierce even the most grandiose ego. In those moments,